Texas has long been known as a land of extremes. Its vast geography stretches from dry plains and rolling hills to thick forests and coastal regions, all of which face a recurring enemy that grows more ferocious with every passing decade: wildfire. To understand the devastating fires raging in the state today, it is essential to look back at the most destructive episodes that scarred Texas over the last 10 to 20 years. These events not only destroyed homes and forests, but also reshaped policies, emergency response systems, and the way Texans view their environment. History does not just mark tragedy, it carries lessons that, if embraced, can protect communities from repeating the same mistakes. One of the most infamous disasters in Texas wildfire history was the Bastrop Complex Fire of 2011. What began as a spark quickly grew into a nightmare fueled by extreme drought, high winds, and the buildup of dry vegetation. Over 34,000 acres burned in Bastrop County alone, making it the single most destructive wildfire in Texas history. The fire destroyed more than 1,600 homes, displaced thousands of residents, and killed 2 people. Beyond the human tragedy, the ecological toll was staggering. The unique Lost Pines ecosystem, a rare forest of loblolly pines isolated from their eastern cousins, suffered catastrophic loss. In the months following, Texas officials recognized that suppression alone could not save communities. The Bastrop Fire exposed a hard truth. Decades of fire suppression and unchecked growth had left forests overloaded with fuel, waiting for the perfect storm to ignite. But Bastrop was not an isolated case. Fires in the Texas Panhandle have long been some of the most destructive in state history, and the early 2000s highlighted this risk. In 2006, a series of fast-moving fires swept across the region, burning nearly 1 million acres. Entire ranches were consumed, and the cattle industry suffered heavy losses. A similar story repeated in 2017 and again in 2024, when the Panhandle once more became ground zero for enormous fires that spread rapidly across open rangeland. These disasters underlined how vulnerable the state's agricultural heartland remains, with wide stretches of dry grass acting as fuel and strong winds turning small sparks into raging infernos. The economic hit was measured not just in destroyed property, but in weakened livelihoods, as ranchers saw herds decimated and grazing lands reduced to ash. The Eastland Complex Fire in 2022 further reinforced the lesson that no part of Texas is immune. Spanning more than 54,000 acres, this fire destroyed homes and infrastructure, leading to significant financial losses for both families and local governments. The blaze underscored a recurring theme. Small communities often lack the resources to fight massive fires on their own. Volunteer fire departments, though courageous and determined, can be easily overwhelmed by the scale and speed of modern wildfires. This raised tough questions about the balance of state and local responsibility and how funds should be allocated to ensure preparedness before disaster strikes. The economic and ecological costs of these fires are staggering when taken together. Billions of dollars have been lost over the past 2 decades in damages to homes, ranches, and public infrastructure. Insurance companies have paid out massive claims, while many families never fully recovered financially or emotionally from losing everything in the flames. Wildlife habitats have been erased, and forests that took centuries to grow were destroyed in days. Soil erosion often follows, leading to long-term ecological imbalance that affects water quality, agriculture, and biodiversity. Each fire carves scars deeper than what is visible in charred landscapes. It leaves lasting wounds in communities and ecosystems that take decades to heal. Yet amid tragedy lies the opportunity for reflection and adaptation. After Bastrop, prescribed burns became more widely discussed and cautiously adopted as a tool to reduce fuel loads in vulnerable forests. These controlled burns mimic the natural cycle of fire, clearing underbrush and preventing the catastrophic buildup that makes modern wildfires so destructive. Other lessons came from states like California and even nations like Australia, where the reality of living with fire forced a shift from reactive suppression to proactive management. Texas began to see that firefighting resources alone are not enough. Prevention, planning, and education at the community level are critical. People who live on the edge of wildland and urban zones learned the importance of creating defensible space around their homes by clearing brush, using fire-resistant materials, and preparing evacuation plans. Awareness campaigns gained traction, though challenges remain in reaching every at-risk community across such a vast state. The history of Texas wildfires over the past 2 decades paints a sobering picture. Every few years, another region suffers devastation on a massive scale. But these stories also reveal resilience. Communities rebuild, often stronger and wiser than before. Each fire sparked debates about land management, government responsibility, and personal preparedness, shaping a culture of awareness that is gradually transforming how Texans approach fire risk. The real test is whether these lessons will be fully embraced before the next catastrophic blaze. With climate change amplifying drought and extreme heat, the timeline for action grows shorter. History is not just a record of past loss. It is a warning that tomorrow's outcome depends on what is learned today. Looking deeper into Texas wildfire history reveals not only the intensity of past events, but also the human stories that make each fire unforgettable. Behind every acre burned, there are families displaced, firefighters risking their lives, and communities struggling to rebuild. The Bastrop Complex Fire in 2011 remains etched into the collective memory of Texans because it wasn't just numbers on a page. It was neighborhoods reduced to ash, children who lost their schools, and entire generations forced to start over with nothing but resilience to carry them through. Local churches turned into shelters, volunteers lined up to distribute food and water, and neighbors who had never spoken before found themselves bound by shared loss. That unity became a symbol of hope, but it also illuminated how unprepared much of the state was for a disaster of such magnitude. Economically, the fires over the last 20 years have proven crippling. Texas is not just a state with wide open landscapes. It is an economic powerhouse driven by agriculture, oil, and increasingly technology hubs. Each time a wildfire sweeps across ranch lands, the cattle industry suffers. In 2006, when the Panhandle burned, thousands of cattle perished in the flames, while countless more were left without pasture. Ranchers were forced to sell herds at a loss, undermining years of hard work and generational wealth. The costs rippled far beyond the ranch gates, affecting feed suppliers, transport companies, and local economies dependent on agriculture. Similarly, when fires threaten oil fields or critical infrastructure, the damage can cause energy price fluctuations and ripple through national markets. Wildfires in Texas are never isolated to one community. Their impacts stretch far into the economic fabric of the entire country. Ecologically, each blaze tears into systems that take decades or centuries to rebuild. The Bastrop Fire's destruction of the lost pines showed how fragile unique ecosystems can be. These loblolly pines, cut off from their eastern relatives for thousands of years, held not just beauty, but genetic diversity that scientists valued. Their near eradication reminded experts that protecting biodiversity requires more than firefighting. It requires proactive stewardship. In the Panhandle, the fires that consumed grasslands created a different challenge. With so much topsoil exposed, erosion became a serious issue, threatening future grazing and farming. Water runoff increased, reducing water quality in rivers and streams that serve both wildlife and human populations. The ecological damage from wildfires can linger for generations, creating a hidden cost that does not appear in financial reports, but reshapes the land in profound ways. Texas has learned from these hard lessons, though progress has been uneven. One of the most significant steps has been increasing the role of the Texas A&M Forest Service and the Texas Division of Emergency Management in coordinating resources. Wildfire response is no longer just about local volunteer firefighters. It is about mobilizing statewide teams, aircraft, and mutual aid agreements. These shifts have saved lives and property in recent fires, but they also revealed the limits of even the best coordinated suppression. Fires are burning hotter, faster, and longer than ever before. Suppression without prevention is like mopping up water while ignoring the broken pipe. This realization has pushed more conversations toward controlled burns, vegetation management, and land use planning, though these remain politically contentious and financially challenging to implement at scale. Lessons have also come from outside Texas. California's catastrophic wildfires, particularly after 2017, provided case studies in how utilities, zoning policies, and urban planning can worsen or reduce risks. Australia's Black Summer fires of 2019-2020 highlighted the importance of indigenous land management practices, where controlled burns had been used for centuries to balance ecosystems. Texans began asking whether similar approaches could be adapted to local conditions. Could ranchers be incentivized to manage grasslands with controlled burns? Could suburban developers be required to design fire-resistant neighborhoods on the edges of forests? Each lesson raised practical, financial, and cultural debates. But the conversation itself marked progress compared to the days when wildfires were seen only as freak accidents, rather than predictable outcomes of mismanaged landscapes. At the community level, the greatest lesson has been the importance of readiness. In fire-prone counties, residents have increasingly been encouraged to prepare go bags with essentials, to establish evacuation routes, and to clear vegetation near their homes. Some communities have launched educational campaigns in schools, teaching children the science of fire behavior, so they understand both its danger and its necessity in certain contexts. Fire-resistant building materials, once considered a luxury, are slowly gaining ground in construction codes. However, the pace of adoption is uneven, with wealthier communities better able to afford upgrades, while poorer regions remain disproportionately vulnerable. Perhaps the most sobering lesson is that history suggests wildfires are not isolated freak disasters, but recurring events. Every few years, Texas faces another large-scale blaze, and each one tests whether the state truly learned from the last. Too often, reports are written, policies are discussed, and then attention drifts until the next crisis reignites the urgency. Firefighters on the ground often say that their work is like fighting the same battle over and over again. Only the flames get stronger each time. The challenge for Texas is not whether it can respond heroically, history shows it can, but whether it can build the long-term infrastructure, policies, and culture to prevent and mitigate fires before they spiral out of control. That is the deeper lesson from the past 2 decades. History's tragedies are warnings, and ignoring them guarantees their repetition. Looking at the record of Texas wildfires, one striking pattern is how quickly fire seasons are changing. 2 decades ago, massive blazes were viewed as rare, once-in-a-decade events. But as droughts intensified and population spread further into rural lands, the frequency of large fires grew. In 2011, the drought created a tinderbox that consumed nearly 4 million acres across the state, leaving scars visible from the sky. But less than a decade later, similar conditions repeated, with fires breaking out not just in one region, but across multiple corners of Texas simultaneously. What was once extraordinary has begun to feel almost routine. This trend alone underscores why lessons from history must be actively applied. Waiting for memory to fade is no longer an option, because the next major fire always seems just around the corner. The economic weight of these disasters accumulates in staggering sums. After the Bastrop fire, insurance payouts reached hundreds of millions of dollars, and rebuilding efforts dragged on for years. Small businesses vanished overnight, unable to recover from the double blow of property loss and the sudden disappearance of customers. Rural economies, often fragile even in the best of times, faced downward spirals as residents moved away rather than risk rebuilding. Farmers and ranchers not only lost livestock, but also the generational continuity of their livelihoods. In some cases, young Texans who might have inherited family ranches chose not to return after devastating fires, breaking cycles that had lasted for over a century. When viewed this way, wildfires don't just burn land, they burn futures, changing the demographic and cultural landscape of entire regions. Ecological loss can feel abstract until it touches everyday life. When native habitats are destroyed, invasive species often move in quickly. In Texas, the aftermath of fires has sometimes opened the door to aggressive plants that thrive in disturbed soil, choking out native grasses critical for cattle grazing. Wildlife displaced by fire often pushes into suburban neighborhoods, creating unexpected human-animal conflicts. Even more subtle is the impact on water cycles. Burned land sheds water differently, causing floods where none occurred before. Ash and debris wash into reservoirs, complicating drinking water supplies for cities that depend on clean rivers. These cascading effects reveal how interconnected Texas ecosystems are, and how one massive fire can alter the balance for decades. Comparing Texas to other fire-prone states provides context. California has endured megafires that make national headlines, with losses measured in the tens of billions of dollars. But Texas, with its unique blend of grasslands, forests, and urban sprawl, faces challenges that are just as severe, even if they draw less national attention. One key difference lies in building patterns. California has stricter codes for fire-resistant construction developed after repeated disasters. Texas, however, has historically placed more trust in local autonomy, allowing counties and towns to decide building requirements. This means that while some wealthy suburbs may use fire-resistant roofing or landscaping, many rural and working-class communities remain exposed. Here lies a central lesson. Decentralization can empower communities, but without statewide standards, vulnerability grows unevenly. Another lesson arises from the role of utilities and infrastructure. In California, downed power lines have been linked to catastrophic fires. Texas has so far avoided disasters on that scale, but as the electrical grid expands to meet population growth, experts warn that without strict oversight, similar tragedies could occur. Preventing utility-sparked wildfires requires constant maintenance, tree trimming, and modernization of equipment, investments that cost millions up front, but save billions in avoided damage. History teaches that ignoring these investments is a gamble with lives and landscapes at stake. At the human level, one of the clearest lessons has been about preparedness and mental resilience. Survivors of past wildfires often describe how unprepared they felt when evacuation orders came. Many assumed they would have hours, even days, to decide what to take with them, only to discover they had minutes before flames closed in. Some who ignored warnings didn't survive. Fire departments and emergency agencies have since worked to improve alert systems, but the human factor remains decisive. Communities that drill for emergencies, that educate residents about fire behavior, tend to fare better than those that treat fires as distant possibilities. This is a sobering lesson because it shows that resilience isn't just about budgets or firefighting aircraft. It's about culture, awareness, and habits formed long before smoke appears on the horizon. From the ashes of tragedy, stories of heroism also emerge, and these stories become part of the lesson. In Bastrop, firefighters fought against towering walls of flame with limited resources, knowing they could not save every home, but determined to save as many as possible. Volunteers risked their safety to evacuate animals, from horses to family pets, refusing to leave them behind. These acts of courage remind Texans that in every wildfire there is both destruction and a reminder of human solidarity. But as uplifting as these stories are, they also carry a warning. Relying on heroism alone is not a strategy. Systematic prevention, planning, and adaptation must complement bravery, or the cycle will repeat ends. As Texas looks back on its wildfire history, it becomes clear that these events are not simply natural disasters, but also policy failures and missed opportunities. Land management that neglects brush clearing, funding shortfalls that delay equipment upgrades, and zoning that allows unchecked sprawl into high-risk zones. All of these amplify fire risk. Each fire in the last 20 years has shown how these human decisions magnify natural hazards. If there is one overarching lesson from history, it is that the cost of inaction is always greater than the cost of preparation. Texas has paid dearly to learn this lesson, and the true test lies in whether those sacrifices will lead to a safer future. When examining the long arc of wildfire management in Texas, one lesson shines through repeatedly. Prevention is far less costly than recovery. Yet prevention is also harder to prioritize because it lacks the urgency of flames on the horizon. For decades, Texas has struggled with this paradox. After a major blaze, funding and political attention surge. New equipment is purchased, task forces are formed, and community awareness campaigns intensify. But as months pass and other priorities demand focus, momentum fades. By the time the next drought season arrives, the cycle repeats. This stop-and-start approach has left Texas perpetually vulnerable, caught between lessons learned and lessons forgotten. History offers stark evidence of this cycle. Following the Bastrop Fire in 2011, lawmakers pledged to strengthen firefighting capacity. Additional aircraft were leased and training programs expanded. But within just a few years, budget constraints forced cutbacks. Rural fire departments once again faced shortages of hoses, protective gear, and fuel for trucks. When another series of blazes erupted later in the decade, communities discovered that promises made after 2011 had not been fully realized. For many Texans, it felt like déjà vu, a painful reminder that memory fades faster than burned forests regrow. If Texas is to break this cycle, it must internalize the lesson that preparedness is not a one-time project, but an ongoing commitment. Another key lesson lies in land management. Fires thrive on fuel, and in Texas, that fuel often takes the form of dense brush and unmanaged grasslands. Historically, Native American tribes and early settlers used controlled burns to reduce this risk, recognizing that small, managed fires prevent catastrophic ones. But as populations grew and urban areas expanded, the practice of prescribed burning declined, replaced by a desire to suppress all fire. The unintended result was an accumulation of fuel that turned ordinary dry seasons into explosive firestorms. Recent years have seen a slow revival of controlled burns, with agencies like the Texas A&M Forest Service training specialists to reintroduce fire safely. However, resistance remains strong among some communities who fear that any intentional fire could escape control. The lesson from history is clear. Avoiding fire entirely creates greater danger in the long run. Public education and trust are essential to restoring this ancient but effective practice. Comparisons with other states provide additional perspective. California, for example, has invested heavily in prescribed burns and community fire breaks after suffering devastating losses. While the results are far from perfect, these measures have at times slowed or redirected fires, giving residents critical hours to evacuate. Texas can draw from these experiences, adapting them to its unique mix of forests, prairies, and suburbs. The challenge lies in tailoring solutions without simply copying policies that may not fit Texas's scale or culture. In a state where private land ownership is deeply valued, convincing individuals to support statewide land management initiatives requires careful negotiation. Yet history shows that when landowners and government agencies collaborate, as seen in certain ranching communities, the results can be transformative. This suggests that cooperation, not top-down mandates alone, is the path. Public awareness campaigns form another vital lesson. In the aftermath of major wildfires, outreach programs have tried to teach residents how to create defensible space around their homes, use fire-resistant building materials, and keep evacuation kits ready. Where these lessons took root, survival rates improved. Neighborhoods with clear evacuation routes and trained volunteer coordinators often fared better than those without. But sustaining such awareness is difficult when the immediacy of danger fades. Many families who diligently prepared after one fire gradually let habits slip as the years passed. By the time the next fire came, they were once again unready. This points to a broader lesson. Fire safety must be embedded into culture, much like seatbelts or smoke detectors, rather than treated as a temporary project. The role of science and technology also emerges from Texas's wildfire history. Advances in satellite monitoring, weather modeling, and drone surveillance have given agencies unprecedented tools to track fire risk and behavior. But the lesson here is not simply about acquiring gadgets. It's about integrating data into decision-making. In some past fires, delays occurred not because information was lacking, but because agencies failed to coordinate effectively. Lessons from those failures have prompted reforms, including joint command centers and improved communication protocols. The challenge is ensuring that these systems remain funded and updated, rather than falling into disrepair between disasters. History shows that technology can save lives, but only if paired with training, maintenance, and interagency cooperation. Equally important is the lesson of equity. Wildfires do not strike all communities equally. In past Texas fires, lower-income residents were often hit hardest, living in older homes without fire-resistant upgrades or lacking insurance to rebuild afterward. Evacuation, too, carried unequal burdens. Families without reliable vehicles or financial means sometimes had no way to flee quickly. These realities highlight the lesson that wildfire management is also a question of social justice. Preparing for the future means not only equipping firefighters, but also supporting vulnerable populations with resources, education, and fair rebuilding programs. Ignoring this dimension ensures that history's injustices will be repeated. Finally, the lesson of memory itself cannot be overstated. Texas's wildfire record is not just a list of acres burned and dollars lost. It is a library of lived experiences, of families who watched their homes turn to ash, of firefighters who risked collapse from exhaustion, of communities that came together in both grief and resilience. Preserving these stories through education, documentaries, and public commemoration ensures that future generations understand the stakes. History forgotten is history repeated. Texas's challenge is to keep these memories alive, not as relics of tragedy, but as guides of survival. In sum, the lessons of Texas's wildfire history speak with urgency. Prevention over reaction, managed fire over unchecked fuel, awareness over complacency, cooperation over isolation. Every blaze of the past 2 decades has written these lessons in smoke and ash. The question now is whether Texas as a whole will finally commit to learning. Because the next wildfire will not wait for policymakers, communities, or individuals to be ready. It will test whether history has truly taught what it must. The broader picture of wildfire management in Texas is not complete without looking at how the state's lessons resonate beyond its own borders. Fires are not confined by state lines, and the ripple effects of Texas's disasters have often reached neighboring regions. When smoke from the 2011 Bastrop Fire drifted into Louisiana and Oklahoma, it became clear that Texas's wildfire management is part of a larger regional ecosystem. This interconnection has encouraged greater collaboration between states, sharing resources during peak fire seasons and exchanging knowledge about what strategies succeed or fail. These cross-border experiences provide additional lessons that amplify what Texas has already learned within its own boundaries. One such lesson is the necessity of mutual aid agreements. During some of the largest fires, Texas alone could not provide enough firefighters, engines, or aircraft to meet the scale of the crisis. Mutual aid systems allowed reinforcements to arrive from other states, filling critical gaps. But history also shows that coordination in these situations can be chaotic without clear structures. In past wildfires, communication breakdowns led to duplication of efforts or left areas inadequately covered. Over time, the state has learned that planning these agreements in advance, setting standards, training together, and pre-establishing command hierarchies makes all the difference. Texas's evolving relationship with neighboring states demonstrates that fire management is most effective when it anticipates collaboration rather than improvising in the heat of crisis. International comparisons further reinforce this point. Australia, with its infamous bushfires, has spent decades refining strategies that mirror Texas's challenges. There, prescribed burning is considered essential, and public education campaigns are deeply embedded into national culture. After studying these approaches, Texas agencies have sought to adapt some of Australia's lessons, though cultural and legal differences require adjustments. The exchange of knowledge highlights that wildfire management is a global issue with shared lessons, where disasters in one region can inform preparedness in another. For Texas, embracing this global perspective may prove vital in an era when climate change is accelerating wildfire risks worldwide. The economic lessons of Texas's wildfires also reverberate. Each major blaze has left behind staggering bills for rebuilding infrastructure, restoring farmland, and supporting displaced families. The Bastrop Fire alone caused nearly $325 million in insured losses, while broader economic damage likely exceeded that figure. These numbers underscore a simple but powerful lesson. Prevention is not just about saving lives and landscapes, it is also about saving money. Studies have repeatedly shown that every dollar invested in prevention, such as clearing brush, creating fire breaks, or supporting rural fire departments, saves many more dollars in avoiding damages. Yet political debates often frame prevention as a cost rather than a savings. Texas's history provides ample evidence that this framing is short-sighted. The cycle of devastation and costly recovery highlights the fiscal wisdom of long-term investments in fire resilience. Another dimension of Texas's experience is the ecological lesson. Fires are not solely destructive, they are also natural agents of renewal. In grasslands, fire clears invasive species and stimulates new growth. In forests, fire can open space for young trees and recycle nutrients into the soil. But when fires are too intense, fueled by decades of accumulated brush and extended drought, they cross the line from renewal to devastation, killing root systems and altering landscapes for generations. Texas's recent history demonstrates this delicate balance. In areas where fire was reintroduced in controlled ways, ecosystems have flourished. But where fire was suppressed and then erupted uncontrollably, biodiversity collapsed. This ecological history teaches that fire management must work with nature rather than against it. The lesson is that avoiding fire altogether is not an option. The choice is between managed fire and catastrophic fire. There are also cultural lessons embedded in wildfire history. For many rural Texans, fire is not an abstract issue. It is part of their lived identity. Ranchers, farmers, and small-town families have developed traditions of community firefighting, where neighbors come together with tractors and water tanks to defend land. These grassroots responses are often heroic, but they also reveal gaps in official support. Where government resources lag, communities are forced to fill the void. The lesson here is twofold. Local resilience is powerful, but it should complement, not replace, professional capacity. Strengthening these community traditions with training, equipment, and coordination could turn a patchwork of local responses into a robust auxiliary system that works hand in hand with state and federal agencies. The psychological dimension of wildfire history offers another important lesson. Survivors often describe the trauma of watching flames consume homes, the uncertainty of evacuation, and the grief of loss that lingers long after rebuilding. These human experiences remind us that wildfires are not just events measured in acres and dollars, they are deeply personal crises. Over the past 2 decades, Texas has slowly learned to integrate mental health support into disaster response, though gaps remain. Counseling services, community healing events, and recognition of trauma are crucial elements of recovery. History shows that without addressing these invisible wounds, recovery remains incomplete. Thus, one lesson of wildfire history is that rebuilding must include not only structures but also spirits. A final overarching lesson is humility. Time and again, wildfires have shown that no amount of technology, manpower, or planning can eliminate all risk. Nature retains the final word. Even the most sophisticated firefighting efforts have been humbled by sudden wind shifts or lightning storms. This does not mean preparation is futile, but it does highlight the limits of human control. Texas's wildfire history teaches that resilience lies in accepting these limits, preparing as best as possible, and fostering communities that can adapt and recover even when plans falter. It is a lesson of balance, between ambition and realism, between human will and natural force. In closing, the historical record of wildfires in Texas provides a mosaic of lessons: economic, ecological, cultural, and psychological. Together, they form a guidebook for the future. Whether Texas chooses to follow it consistently is an open question, but the cost of ignoring it has been written in smoke, ash, and grief. The hope is that by remembering, adapting, and acting, the state can transform painful history into a foundation for resilience. Because the fires of the past, if truly understood, may yet protect Texas from the fires of tomorrow. Looking back across the decades of wildfire history in Texas, one truth becomes unavoidable. The fires themselves are not the only disaster. The greater danger lies in forgetting, in allowing the painful lessons of the past to fade into the background as daily life resumes. Each blaze, from the Bastrop Complex Fire in 2011 to the more recent wildfires that have scarred central and western Texas, has left a record written in loss and resilience. That record exists for a reason. It is meant to be remembered, studied, and used to shape a safer future. If ignored, history is destined to repeat itself with even greater ferocity. The conclusion that emerges is both sobering and hopeful. Sobering because the risks are real and rising. Climate change is making summers hotter, droughts longer, and storms more unpredictable. Urban sprawl is pushing homes deeper into the wildland-urban interface, placing more people directly in harm's way. The potential for massive, destructive fires has never been greater. Hopeful, because Texas has also shown remarkable resilience. Communities have rebuilt stronger, fire agencies have improved coordination, and policymakers have begun to grapple with the scale of the challenge. The past does not just warn, it also illuminates the path forward. One of the clearest lessons is that prevention must come before reaction. For too long, wildfire management has been dominated by images of helicopters dropping water and firefighters battling flames. While these efforts are heroic, they are also the last line of defense. True safety begins months or years earlier, with prescribed burns, with clearing defensible space around communities, with public education that empowers individuals to prepare. The history of Texas wildfires proves again and again that once the fire is roaring, choices are limited. Prevention is where real victories are won. Equally important is investment in the people who stand on the front lines. Volunteer fire departments in rural Texas are often the first responders, yet many struggle with outdated equipment and limited funding. After major blazes, these communities often shoulder the burden with extraordinary courage, but little support. Strengthening these local forces is not just a matter of fairness, it is essential to survival. The state's history shows that when local responders are well prepared, losses are reduced. When they are not, tragedies multiply. Investing in these departments, providing training and resources, is a lesson Texas cannot afford to ignore. The economic argument reinforces this. The cost of wildfires, billions in damages, lost homes and shattered livelihoods, dwarfs the cost of prevention and preparedness. Yet, time and again, budgets for proactive measures have been slashed, only to be followed by catastrophic fires that demand emergency spending. This cycle of neglect and regret is one of the most painful patterns in Texas's wildfire history. Breaking it requires political will and public demand. Citizens must recognize that money spent today on prevention saves far more tomorrow. It is not merely an environmental issue, it is a financial necessity. At the same time, the ecological story cannot be overlooked. Texas's landscapes, from pine forests to prairies, evolved with fire. Suppressing fire entirely has created unnatural fuel buildups that make modern blazes so destructive. Learning to live with fire, using it wisely, respecting its role, has been one of the hardest but most important lessons. The future depends on accepting that balance, using prescribed burns to mimic natural cycles, and ensuring ecosystems are resilient rather than brittle. The history of scorched forests and devastated wildlife habitats should be motivation enough. But perhaps the deepest lesson lies in the human stories. Survivors who have watched their homes reduced to ashes, families who have fled through smoke-filled roads, and firefighters who have risked everything to protect strangers. They carry the emotional truth of wildfire history. These stories remind us that this is not just about statistics or policies. It is about lives upended, dreams interrupted, and courage tested. To honor these stories, Texas must do more than rebuild. It must change. The gift survivors offer us is perspective, and ignoring it will dishonor their sacrifice. As we close this exploration of wildfire history, one truth rings clear. The fires of the past are both warnings and guides. They teach that prevention is cheaper than recovery, that ecosystems need fire managed wisely, that communities are strongest when prepared together, and that human resilience is a resource as vital as water or fuel breaks. Texas has already paid dearly for these lessons in blood, sweat, and grief. The question is whether the state and its people will use that knowledge to step into a safer, more resilient future. For viewers watching today, this history is not just information, it is a call to action. Wildfire risk is growing, and every citizen has a role to play, whether in supporting community preparedness, advocating for stronger policies, or taking steps at home to reduce danger. We share this story not simply to recount the past, but to help build a safer tomorrow. The responsibility lies with all of us. If you found this video meaningful, we invite you to join us on this journey of awareness and resilience. Subscribe to Crisis Lens to stay informed about the critical issues shaping our world. Like this video to help spread awareness, and share it with friends and family so these lessons reach as many people as possible. Together, we can turn the painful history of Texas wildfires into a guide for survival, adaptation, and hope. The flames of the past need not consume our future. If we learn, act, and prepare, they can instead light the way forward.